Thanks for tuning in at Brackies.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on making a multiplayer FPS in Unity. Today we are going to have a look at importing a cool gun model into the game. And we'll also have a look at setting up a proper camera to render the camera, or to render the weapon, so we can control stuff like field of view for the weapon only, and also prevent clipping through other objects. So that's going to be quite exciting. The model that we are going to be using today is from Sameen Ibne, a good friend of mine. Links to him are in the description. And you can see here that I've downloaded the multiplayer FPS assets. Those are downloadable through brackies.com, or you could just download the entire project off GitHub. Again, all the links are in the description. So if you want more of these kinds of assets, you should definitely check out Sameen. He does client work for very cheap and he's just great to work with. Let's get started. So I'm going to open up this multiplayer FPS assets folder, which you get in a zip file if you download it. And under weapons, we now have a sci-fi automatic. And here we have an FBX file, which is the model itself. And we also have some textures. Oh, I should also mention that the reason why I don't have the intro screen and all that fancy stuff in the face cam is because I'm quite in a hurry, but it will be back in the next video. So let's just take this sci-fi automatic and drag it into our Unity project. Just the entire folder, and we'll wait for it to import the different images. Some of these textures are quite high resolution and they're all hand painted, so that's very nice. Then let's go ahead and make a new folder here, and let's just call this one, I actually want to make one called models now. And we can just drag the sci-fi automatic into that folder. We could maybe also make a subfolder called weapons, but not unless we have more than one weapon. So for now, this will be fine. Then what we will do is we will take our player prefab and drag it into the scene so we have something to use as a reference. And I just noticed that the collider here seems to be a bit off compared to our graphic. I actually don't know why that is. So maybe we should take our player model and just move him back a bit. There, just to center him a bit on the collider itself. Good. So maybe it's the collider that's offset. No, that should be centered. That is centered. Yeah, so that just looks a bit better. Good. So if we go into our camera, we currently have our gun here. Instead of just having our gun directly under the camera, I want to create an empty, which we are going to call the weapon holder object, and this will just allow us to do some transformation for all of the different weapons. So we can just move this and all other weapons will move with it. And let's just keep the gun here for a second. Then let's go under our models, sci-fi automatic, and drag in the gun. And let's drag it under the weapon holder, and we can see that this is currently gigantic, and that's because we have a pre-applied scale here. If we reset that, it quickly shrinks down to be very, very tiny. And let's now drag the weapon holder over to kind of where we want all of our weapons to be. Somewhere like here, and then we want all of them to be rotated about -90 on the X to account for Blender's weird rotation. And then we can select our model and we can bump up the scale factor to something like 10 and hit apply. We can also disable animations, no rig, and all of the other stuff should be just fine. And I think this is a pretty good scale to work with. It might be a bit too large compared to the model, but that depends on kind of the look you're going for. If you're going for kind of a comedic look that I am here, with these funny looking robot thingies trying to shoot each other, well then a large gun could be kind of fun. So I'm just going to keep this for now at least. Great, so I think that this gun is almost in position. We can go ahead and drag the weapon holder down a bit, something like that. And we don't want this to be colliding with our model, so we can maybe drag this out. You will of course also have to kind of make it look good in terms of when viewed from the camera, but I'm going to show you a trick in a moment that will allow us to kind of zoom in on the gun here without actually changing its position in world space, because we want this to kind of not collide with our graphics themselves. And we can also go ahead and maybe move this even further back to kind of avoid that. Good. So now that we have that set up, something like that. Yeah, we can go ahead and delete our temporary gun. It's not something that we're going to be needing. And we can also add some materials to our sci-fi automatic. So you can see that it already has 3 materials applied. It's only one mesh with 3 materials. And let's just begin with the main one. If we go and just lock the inspector here, we can go under the textures. And we can select them and actually view their full names down here. So let's find the one that says main albedo transparency. That's going to go up here under albedo. And let's make that completely white to go with it. Then we have a sci-fi automatic main metallic smoothness. That goes under the metallic slot. And then we have a normal map, which goes there. And then we hit fix now. And that should give us a cool base to work with. And then we can go collapse that and go under the magazine, and that's this one. So again, albedo transparency, and make that completely white. Then we have the metallicness, drag that under there, and finally the normal map, which we will hit fix now on. And then finally we have our grip, which goes albedo transparency, white, we have the metallicness, and finally we have the normal map. Good, apply, and now we can actually view our model textures and materialized, so to say, and I think this looks really, really awesome. So great looking model there, and if there's something you want to change, like the color, you can of course change all of these in Photoshop if you want, or you can simply tint them a bit. So if you wanted like a red colored gun, you could just do that in here, and it's actually going to look just fine. So you could also do kind of a purple or maybe a kind of blue color, which I actually kind of dig. I mean, this light blue here actually looks somewhat badass. So I'm just gonna go with that for now, and we can always change it later. So yeah, let's go with that. So that just shows you just how customizable these weapons are, because they are set up properly in every kind of way. And yeah, so let's now hit apply on this player model. It looks like we lost our prefab connection. Oh no, unlock that and then hit apply. Cool. And everything should be set up right. Only a few things aren't, because right now if we were to delete this player and go and hit play, we would see land host that first of all, this gun model, I mean, it's a bit far off. This is not how you hold a gun. It would be much closer to the eye to feel natural. Also, if we look down, it clips through the ground. Also, if we go over here, it will clip through the ground. And that's not something we can prevent when viewed from other players. I mean, here in the scene view, we cannot prevent it from going through the ground unless we want to like limit how far down we can view, which is maybe something we want to do. But one thing is for sure, and that is we don't want it to happen on the screen. So in order to do this, what we actually do is we create a separate camera that is in charge of only drawing the gun. So if we go under our camera here and we right click and then go camera to create a new one, we can then call this the weapon camera. And we need to configure this in a few ways. The first is we need to remember to go to our player under player setup and add a 7th slot here for disabling the weapon camera. So let's just drag that in, and that is something we want to disable if we're not the local player, or we are going to have multiple weapons drawn over the screen and it's going to look super weird. The next part is setting the clear flags to depth only. This way we don't get stuff like skyboxes or solid colors or anything like that. We want the projection to stay at perspective, even though you can change that. Actually, no, that would fuck up. Okay, and then the depth should be 1. And this is because we want it to be drawn on top of the other camera. So if the other camera has a depth of 0, we want a depth of 1 or above. So the value here is completely arbitrary. It just needs to be greater than the default camera. Then the rendering path is going to be fine, occlusion culling, all that. We don't need to change any of these settings, only we need to change the culling mask. And this is again what layers will be drawn for this camera. And currently we want to set this to nothing. And then through script, we want to set our weapon, if we are the local player, to a layer of, let's say, weapon. And then we want to add that to be drawn in here. So let's go ahead and add in a layer. Let's add the layer weapon there. And I'm not assigning this to any object. I'm not assigning it to the weapon camera or the weapon holder or the weapon itself. I'm instead going to assign this through script so we can make sure that it's only the local client that will have this layer assigned. So in here under the culling mask, we are going to go down and select weapon. And this way, this camera is only in charge of drawing the weapon. Then we can delete the flare layer, the GUI layer, and the audio listener. And hit apply on that. Then we can select our default camera, and this is where we want to turn off that layer. So we want to turn off the weapon. We don't want it to be drawn here, or else it's going to be drawn 2 times and on top of itself. And that's going to look super weird and be stupid. So let's not do that. Let's just hit apply on that. And again, if we go ahead and play now, and nothing is going to have changed, we're still clipping through because we're not actually changing the layer of our weapon. So in order to do that, let's go in and find our player shoot script. Let's double click that, and we're just going to make a fairly temporary solution for this, because in the future I really want to have some kind of way of doing weapon switching, or at least a better way of setting up a weapon, pairing it with some graphics and then moving on. I mean, right now graphics is something we do under the player, and the weapon here, the name and the damage, is completely separate from that. I would much rather have this unified idea of a weapon where we have graphics, we have stats and the name and all of those different kinds of stuff, and then we just call a method that says equip weapon and it will load all of that in. But that's in the future, especially when doing networking. That kind of stuff can be tedious. So that's not for this video. Hopefully for a future one. Let me know if that's something that you really want to see. That stuff is coding intensive. So yeah, the name here, we are going to now rename that to Sci-Fi Automatic. We should really come up with a better name. Also, if you have a good name, leave it in the comments. We could do something like the Shredder or Blaster Cannon or something. And the damage is 40 and the range is 100. That's fine. This is an automatic weapon, and therefore we want to in the future add the option to do automatic shooting. But I don't think that's something that we can be covering in this video. It's not too difficult, but we also want some shooting graphics, and in the video where we add those, we are probably going to make it automatic too. Okay, so we have the script here in Visual Studio. And all I want to do here is maybe first off change this to a private player weapon, and let's serialize that, and also make another serialized field, and this is going to be a private, and then it's going to store a reference, and we want that reference is the layer under the transform or the game object. I actually believe it's under game object. Whoops, not game manager. Game object, and this is going to be a reference to the weapon graphics, so we are simply going to do weapon GFX. And then in the start method, we simply say weapon GFX dot layer equals layer mask dot name to layer, and the name that we want here is something that we will probably also specify up here. So a private constant string, and this is not going to be the player tag. This is instead going to, actually I kind of want to make this available, so we'll do a serialized field instead, and this is going to be a private string, and it's going to say weapon layer name. and we are going to default that to weapon. Easy as that. And then we want to take that and put it in here. That's going to take in the string, return an index that is paired with the layer, and that will set that in here. It should really be that easy. And because we're only calling this start method on the local client, because we are remembering to disable this through script. If not, you can see up here under the player setup, we have the player shoot right here. So we are disabling that. So therefore it will only be called on the local client, and therefore only the local weapon will be set to that layer, and everything works out. So now on the weapon graphics, we want to add a reference there. So let's just drag this in. Go into camera, weapon holder, sci-fi automatic, find our player, drag that in there. Weapon layer name, weapon, and apply. Boom. Cool. Let's do that. Let's hit save. Let's just try this on the local client first, LAN host. So now you can see no clipping. Yay, celebrate. And we can still view it in the scene here, of course, in a moment. And you can see it still clips there. That's not something that we can prevent right now. And we can see that if we move over to the box here, there's no clipping on the screen. So our technique is actually working, and that's awesome. Another thing that you will notice here is without changing the position of the gun here, or without limiting our field of view, we can limit the field of view of the camera that draws our gun. And this way we can zoom in on this gun, make it feel like it's actually closer to the robot without limiting how much we can see of our surroundings. So if we go into player 1 camera, then weapon camera, we can drag in the field of view here, and now it looks much more like an actual FPS, where we have our hands on the grip and the gun is much closer to the eye. So this looks much better if you ask me. And again, we haven't changed the position of our camera at all, or how much we are able to see. Actually, what we can do is we can go in. I'm just going to change the clipping planes here to something like 0.1 just to be sure. If we can go in and select the other camera, and we can actually make the field of view much larger here. So if you wanted the ability for the player to see much more, you could actually do that. And I'm going to bump this up to 70 because I like games with a bit higher field of view. So you can just see how much control this actually gives us. And yeah, so let's stop playing. Drag in the player here and just recreate those changes because we made them while we were in play mode. So let's set the field of view here to something like 30, the near clipping plane to 0.1, hit apply on that, and the camera's field of view to 70, and let's hit apply on that too. So now that we have those things there, let's apply, delete the player. Let's build this out to a separate client, just so we know that this works on the network and not just in on the local instance here, which is also the host. So let's build this here. Wait for the lighting to regenerate in Unity. There we go. Let's hit play here. Go LAN host. And you can see that 30 might have been a bit too much actually. And what I also want to do is I probably want to move this over a bit more to the left. But this is something we can debug on the local client. What we want to see is whether or not it shows up when we join with another client here. And indeed it does. So we can see the weapon there, we can see it here, we can see it updating, and you can see that it looks just fine when we aim around. And also observe just how shiny these weapons actually are. I mean, they look really great. So that was basically all for what we want to do today. Actually, it was quite a short and to the point tutorial, if I must say so to myself. And also, again, I just want to tweak these settings a bit. So the weapon holder, let's just drag it over a bit. And the weapon camera, let's try that 40 instead. Let's see if that works as well. LAN host. Yeah, and just ignore that camera. That's because I didn't want to disable or remove the other player here. and that's not something that's supposed to happen. So there we go. You can see here that this actually looks much better, and of course you can tweak that any way you want. Next up is probably adding some particles when we shoot, maybe a line renderer from where we shoot, and maybe even some bullet impacts. Also, I really want to fix this bug where we can't really jump on top of objects without it bugging out. So that's definitely also a priority. And again, this bug here only happens because we are giving one player control of multiple players, which we really shouldn't. So as soon as we delete that, the bug is fixed and everything is working. So that was basically it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.